Sambo and welcome to Dawai Kudroen. My guest tonight is Honorable Chairperson of National Council, Dr. Sonam Kinga. Your Excellency, thank you so much for your time. I know you're a busy man these days preparing for the session, but it's always a pleasure to talk to you. As we have already discussed, maybe we can, the interesting subject that people want to know is what Pay Commission has done and what is going to happen. Government has already said or informed the Parliament that they are going to present the discussion this session. So what is your take on this? The biggest worry that many would have, many in the lower income group might have, is if there is a blanket revision, then that would only create further income disparity. So what do you think of it?
Thank you, Dawa. It is a privilege for me always to appear on your show, which I really enjoy as a platform to share views and articulate thoughts on key issues that we have at the moment in our country.
Yes.
As much as the Pay Commission's report is an object of interest, I sometimes feel that the discussion at this point of time may be a bit premature, in the sense that we do not know what the content of the report is. We know that it has been submitted to the government. We know that the government will present it in the forthcoming session of the Parliament, but without knowing the content of it, it is really difficult to engage in a meaningful dialogue. Nevertheless, one can make some basic assumptions and actually guide our discourse with a national objective in mind. What do I mean by this? No matter what strategies are used in revising or increasing pay and allowances, in the end, the objective of it, in my view, amongst other things, should really be to narrow the income gap that has been growing between the top and the bottom slab income earners. Despite all the noble intent of the Pay Commission report, in whatever form it may come out, if the disparity remains as it is now, and which is not a healthy disparity at the moment, or if it widens, then although each of us at an individual level may feel happy to receive an increased pay package at the end of the month, the consequence on the national psyche as a result of widening disparity will be something that we would not like to imagine. It would be better to preempt that, and I would like to hope that the Pay Commission's report has taken that into consideration.
Yes, Your Excellency, now like it or not, one of the consequences of pay revision would be inflation. Now, while you talk about inflation, it would be easier for the people, salaried people, to deal with it. But are we talking about some fiscal measures, or any measures for that matter, for those people who are unsalaried or who are not non-salaried?
As we discussed in the Zonka program, that is exactly one of my primary concerns. First, inflation is one of the important areas that I'm sure the Pay Commission would have looked into, needed to look into, but it cannot be the only one. If, and I'm saying if because I have not seen the report, if the proposal for pay and allowances increment is largely dictated by the consideration of inflation alone, then it would have lots of other consequences. But we neither have the time to discuss this, nor have the luxury of information to really examine it. So assuming if it were one of the criteria, then the issue that you raised is something we need to reflect deeply upon. By increasing pay and allowances for public servants, which would also see in a few weeks or months a concomitant increase in the corporate sector, a small percentage of the Bhutanese population would be in a position to cope with inflationary pressure. So our total public servants today number about 45,000 beyond civil service, including other public servants. But there are over 600,000 people who face the same pressure owing to problems in the economy, owing to inflation. Now, how do they cope with that? Because they do not see a wage increment, they are not salaried people. So this is something that we need to seriously reflect upon. Pay and salary increase for public servants is one of the measures to help this group of people. But then as a policy, we need to think of the entire population. So how does the concerns of this much larger group who suffer the same consequence as a result of inflation, how are their concerns taken care of? I do not know, so we will have to wait and see. Perhaps there are some recommendations, perhaps there are not. But this is an issue that we need to engage in a serious dialogue.
Yes, Your Excellency. Now, in a way, I'm just letting Your Excellency preempt too much on this subject. But and also, I know that this question may not be appreciated by the public servants. Nonetheless, is it really timely or is it due for the raise? The reason why I'm asking this is, if you look at the current economic situation, we have already austerity measures put in place. And on one hand, without lifting the austerity measures, on the other hand, you are talking about raise. So there is a contradiction within this too. So what do you think? Is it due?
I'm not an economist. I'm not a financial expert. And I will not be able to state with absolute certainty through an expert's point of view whether a pay and allowance increment is timely or not. But we do know one thing, whether you are an expert or not, that there is every single day an argument or a reason that justifies pay and salary allowances. Somewhere someone brings a new argument all the time. Having said that, as you pointed out, we need to look at certain issues that have been on the agenda of national discourse, either spelt out strongly at some point of time, subsumed at other times, but the issue of the economy. And we know that we have a serious problem with our economy. Youth unemployment, rupee shortage, credit crunch, inflation, balance of payment. The economy is really the ailing patient. How do we, as the government and the parliament and other related institutions, address this national issue of an ailing economy? Maybe the proposal of the pay commission, which we have not seen yet, would have reflected on this. And I'm sure they would not have made recommendations in isolation of this economic issue. They would certainly have reflected upon that. Now, assuming that there is a proposal for an increase, assuming that the increase is substantial, then we need to think of increasing our expenditure on the one hand, public expenditure, yes, which also means really a fall in revenue, inability to, maybe inability is a wrong word, but deciding not to invest surplus in some other sectors that may have benefit beyond the public service in the context of an ailing economy. So right now it is again premature to make any judgment, to make any statement, but this is really an issue. And I think whether you are a public servant or not, in the end, as much as we individually would be happy to benefit from and pay an allowance raise, as citizens of a country, we also need to reflect on the larger issue. So yes, pay and allowances increment may be necessary owing to many pressures on the livelihood of everyone else, yet we cannot be focused just on that aspiration and that compulsions alone without reflecting a bit on the situation of our economy, which anyway will impact us, yes, directly or indirectly.
Yes. Yes, Your Excellency, and to all the viewers, I think this debate will continue as and when There are presentations made to the Parliament on this report. We will bring debates on this, and we'll keep it here. But to move on other issues, Your Excellency, what do you think about the follow-up or the implementation of the past resolutions since you have taken over the chair? Because in the past, we have been made to understand that implementation of the past resolutions have been quite poor. And if you look at the audit report, for instance, the same report has been coming in subsequent sessions as well. That means there definitely was a poor implementation process. So for now, what do you think?
In the National Council, we have been able to improve upon the follow-up of resolutions in comparison to the experiences of the last 5 years. And I'm not saying that the experiences of the last 5 years have been wasted. Without that experience, we would not have been able to improve our system. Earlier, and I'm talking about the National Council, not about the National Assembly. Earlier, the resolutions passed by the National Council and sent to the government and its agencies were hardly followed up, and let's be honest, hardly acknowledged as recommendations that needed attention, and perhaps feeling that there are suggestions for policy interventions, legislative review for effecting positive changes. Since last year, when I may say the 11th session of the National Council began, our engagement with the government, with the National Assembly, saw an agreement to streamline and institutionalize the way we follow up on parliamentary resolutions.
Yes.
So since the 12th session, which was the last session, we have been able to institute a system whereby the resolutions, once passed by the National Council, are sent to the government. The government then forwards it to concerned agencies. After a period of time, the agencies report back to the government, and then the government submits it to the National Council, mentioning which resolutions and how have they been able to implement, how they have not been able to implement, justifications provided thereof. So in terms of the cycle of keeping a track on the implementation of the resolutions or reasons for non-implementation, we have been doing fairly well, and we would like to improve upon it further. Although I will not be in a position to say about the National Assembly, but the joint sitting on issues like the Public Account Committee's report on Royal Audit Authority's annual report is something that had a problem initially, but I think that too has been streamlined. And in fact, if you look at the backlog of issues that were not addressed earlier, but even since the last Parliament, the pressure exerted upon the need to expedite addressing those issues, we have seen both the Parliament's interest as well as the commitment and enthusiasm of the dedicated team of professionals of the Royal Audit Authority that have seen over the years an incremental achievement in terms of addressing backlog of audit issues. And I must really congratulate the Royal Audit Authority for heeding the Parliament's call and showing results. And in fact, in the forthcoming session, we will be able to find out how much we have achieved and what else are remaining. So generally, in terms of joint sitting resolutions on Royal Audit Authority, there has been progress that are quite significant.
Yes. So, Your Excellency, you now see that there's a decline in power tussle, because in the past everyone tries to prove that one is more powerful than the other, and in the process implementation has been quite poor, is what some people say. So are you saying that?
I would not be comfortable using the word power tussle. In fact, there need not be a tussle of power, because the Constitution, which is the mother of all laws, is in fact a document that distributes power to different institutions, and that distribution of power among state agencies itself sets a limit on what your powers and responsibilities are. So in terms of what you call power tussle, I do not think it has really manifested in that way. What really was happening was, I think, initially each institution was trying to find its place, then assert itself according to its responsibilities and powers. The other institution and actors perhaps thought that this may not be the responsibility of the other institution also. So there had been this sort of a dialogue and engagement trying to mediate among different institutions and players, and I think finally a consensus building among different institutions have been possible. And if there were not such kind of what you call power tussles earlier, mediation of differences may not have been possible. So all this have been a learning experience. The sort of non-implementation of resolutions as a consequence of power tussle that you say, it may be as a result of that, but in the end, the improvement that we have today is also possible because of that earlier experiences. Without that, we would not been able to reach here. So as much as we look at the past experience critically, we must also acknowledge the fact that without that sort of an experience earlier, the present improvement would not have been possible.
Yes. Your Excellency, now you have assumed the role of Deputy Chairperson in the first Parliament, and now you are the Honourable Chairperson. How do you see the quality of debate and deliberations progressing compared to the past sessions?
We need to look at the experience of the last 5 years and therefore our judgment of the debate in two senses. Firstly, there is this dialogue and debate within the House, within the National Council. Then there is this discourse and debate between the Council and the government, between the Council and the National Assembly. As of now, in the last 1 year, owing to certain legislative processes, the National Assembly and the National Council did not come across an occasion where we had to do a joint sitting on a bill or on an issue, except for the audit reports. But I think beginning this or the next session, there will be lots of joint sittings, perhaps on disputed bills, if there are disputes and differences. And that time one will be able to assess the nature of dialogue and debate between the two houses. Within the National Council itself, I think the sort of debate, the sort of arguments made, the sort of positions taken have been again making steady progress, and that too have been possible because the sort of benchmark we have set in the last 5 years itself serves as a catalyst, incentive or a challenge for the present set of members to match that benchmark or excel it. And I think every member makes the best of their efforts to engage in a meaningful dialogue and either reach such kind of a benchmark or excel it. I am quite happy personally about the way debates are taking place, not just within the formal session of the National Council, but even during the informal monthly, weekly plenary sessions and meetings that we have. Many people think that because the National Council is apolitical, it is very easy to build consensus because you do not have two political parties as in the National Assembly. But what happens is you have 25 different views in the National Council, and yet although because of this there is intense debate, exchange of views and opinions, consensus building has been possible. Our engagement with the government so far, particularly through the question time, has been fruitful, and I am sure, as we discussed in the Dzongkha session, even during this and the subsequent sessions, there will be even more meaningful engagement and high quality of debates.
Yes, Your Excellency, as you mentioned in Dzongkha session, you were recently on your constituency visit, and so would be the case with your honourable members of parliament. Any interesting feedbacks and submissions from the public?
I have been to Merak and Sakteng. This was my 10th visit. I could not go to Merak and Sakteng earlier, not because they voted against me, but because it was winter and most of the people are in the lowlands. It is only around this time that people begin to move up, and it's also the right time to go and meet a lot more people than you would have met if you have gone up in winter, where there is just only a handful of families.
Yes, I thought I'll have a subsequent question to that, but Your Excellency already clarified now.
So, and secondly, because, then let me continue from this. Secondly, because this time I was taking a different route which I have never taken in the last 9 visits.
Yes.
So I went to part of Sakteng this earlier in the lowlands where people do not really depend on yak herding, so they do not move out. These are the lowland people of Sakteng.
Yes.
So usually I always go to Sakteng, come down and meet these lowland communities. Last time I went and visited these 2 communities because this time I knew I was not coming back and meeting them. So this time I had to go to Sakteng and take a long route south to 3 Gyeoks and the Jomotsangka Dungaks.
Yes.
Now, having said that, the issues that people raise, the priority in Merak and Sakteng, as in other highland communities, are issues arising out of the non-implementation of provisions concerning Samdo in the Land Act. The issue is quite simple, that the Samdo records have been deleted. People would like to have it reinstated, but the Land Act 2007 has other provisions such as leasehold. So that issue have been raised, and this is one of the first issues in the question hour that the National Council will be taking up with the Honourable Minister for Agriculture and Forest. The other issue which have been raised is about the need for state to provide campaign funds for local government candidates,
Yes.
just as candidates to parliamentary seats are provided with campaign funds. The other issue that have been raised, and I think the concern is widespread, is about what the Ministry of Education calls it consolidation or rationalization of schools, where schools in distant communities where not many enrollment, then the proposal is to bring them to a centrally located
Yes.
school so that there is more efficiency in terms of usage of resources such as teachers, classrooms, existing other buildings. The meeting with formally or informally with local government officials have necessarily pointed out to the need for a local government's Entitlement Act, and as well as feedback on the Local Government Act, because the present
Yes.
Local Government Act amendment deals with some Tromde issues and they have views on that. So there have been a host of views in different Gyeoks. Some of this would find valuable input when we discuss the Local Government Amendment Act this time. People have also views on the need to amend the Election Act and have many proposals, suggestions which have been shared with me during my visits, as well as through the Dzongkha Tsogdu. They have submitted issues for both the National Assembly and the Council to discuss.
Yes, Your Excellency, again, let me ask you on the quality of the submission of views and queries that these people have. We here in the centre, bureaucrats, civil servants, many would like to believe that we are the educated ones and let us decide anything and everything for the people in rural areas, because they are not educated and they may not know and they may not be able to decide for themselves. This is the kind of understanding we still have in some of our public servants and bureaucrats. What do you think of the quality of submissions?
I think the perception that you just mentioned, that we are the educated one, that those in the village are illiterate and therefore not educated, is a very sorry view. This is a very unhealthy view. What does being educated mean really? Just going to school, having a degree or a master's or a PhD in your own field does not single you out as an educated person in comparison to people who live in villages. They are far more educated and knowledgeable in the field that they specialize in.
Yes.
Maybe farming, maybe livestock, maybe horticulture. So the basic premise that I always subscribe to is that everyone in the country or in our society knows at least what is best for his or her family or for his or her community, because you are part of that environment, part of that society, that culture. So you know the dynamics of your own society. It does not really mean that a school education conferred degree singles you out as a better person. So having said that, the kind of issues articulated by the rural people echo very much the concerns of their community,
Yes.
their perception of the issues, and even their solutions of the way forward. So, for example, when we talk about Samdo and Sokshin issue, this is something that is very passionate, something that the rural people understand in detail. But the moment we start to talk about in towns here, these issues may appear so remote, may not even make sense.
Yes.
So just because you are an educated person having a school education does not enable you to appreciate the complexity and the importance of such a rural issue. So I think the sort of articulation or issues raised by the rural people are of high quality and of direct concern to them, and to which we are bound to respond and pay attention.
Yes. Your Excellency, final question. Before I move on with the question, we would like to thank Your Excellency for publicizing this program on Facebook. In fact, we in BBS should be doing this, but we couldn't do it. And because Your Excellency, you put it on Facebook, I've been receiving so many calls on the kind of questions that I need to put. One concern, now to make it very explicit, media in general have failed to cover this issue, and some of the most active media houses have been very inactive now, and they fail to cover. And those who cover are seen as somebody who's having someone who's having vested interest. The point that I'm coming to is the education city. Why is it not there in the agenda is what people are asking. So in any case, is National Council going to deliberate on this? Because when the board was asked to dissolve, they said without repealing the act, they cannot dissolve. So these are some of the issues that should have come to the Parliament. What do you think?
Dawa, there are standard procedures in both the National Assembly and the National Council about how we set our agenda for discussions.
Yes.
Just because an issue is talked about in some town or villages or in the media does not mean that it will automatically translate its presence on the agenda of the National Council or in the National Assembly. This does not mean that we dismiss or we demean the significance of the issue.
Yes.
So, for example, when the last session of the National Council concluded, during the conclusion, I as the chairperson lay out the agenda and the issues in the agenda for deliberation in this session. The reason we do that is we just have about 4 to 5 months. About 1 to 2 months, members have to go for their constituency visits. You have about 2 to 3 months to work. So if you do not set the agenda in advance, the time needed for consultation, the time needed for research, the time needed to engage in stakeholders' meetings will not be there. So therefore, issues come to the agenda of the National Council by 3 ways. First, bills passed by the National Assembly will come to the National Council. Second, the National Council itself may discuss certain issues and resolve that we will do this. So, for example, we have resolved that we will take the Election Act for amendment, although we are not taking it this time. So, National Council's own discussion. Third, the issues that the Dzongkha Tsogdo would submit, as we are going to do it from this time on. Fourth, there will be issues such as the ones reports submitted by the Royal Audit Authority, the Anti-Corruption Commission. And fifth, there will be issues, constituency-specific issues that members say this is something that we need to discuss for the next session. So the agenda for this session has already been set, and the setting of the agenda a few months earlier is necessary in order to engage in a healthy research, review, consultations and debate. During the last session, which for the National Council was the 12th session, this will be the 13th session because it is a continuous house. In the 12th session, there has not been any proposal by anyone to discuss or review the issue of education city. So therefore, it is not because we think it is unimportant or because we have not heard or known about it, therefore we did not put it in the agenda. So it has not been proposed and therefore it is not on the agenda, simple as that. Nevertheless, if members do feel that there is a need to look at it, if members feel that there is a reason to engage it, they would propose it. But a mere proposal by 1 or 2 members itself does not mean that the House should admit it. The admission of the House must base on certain rationale. Why does the National Council need to review the education city issue? Is it because of the legality? Then that does not really provide a strong reason, because legality is, I think, already a black and white issue that is known. Are there other reasons? What are the justifications? So the proponent to put it on the agenda must come up with a sound rationale and argument that merits the attention of the National Council to review it. As of now, it has not come.
Yes, the only reason why I'm asking this question is because there are people who feel that if the legality is the issue, then people from the previous government should be held accountable so that future problems may not occur, is what people say.
I think we must pay due respects to all sorts of views, and when people articulate views on issues like this, it only means that our people are thinking, that they are being critical, and I am really bound to respect and even encourage them to keep doing so. Now, as I said, if the issue is not about the legality of the education city, but about fixing accountability, this becomes one of the bases of review. If it is about the viability of the project, it becomes another basis. So I am not in a position to say these are the bases, but if and when members do propose that the National Council needs to pay attention to the education city, so sound argument must be built, and then whoever brings that argument must also receive the endorsement of the House. Because just because one or two members propose, it does not be automatically translated into the agenda. Not just with the education city, it is true for all other issues. That is the standard procedure and a professional way of doing it.
Yes, Your Excellency, thank you so much for your time, and we'll be looking forward to having you here for some other debates after the session starts. So thank you so much.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
So with this, we come to the end of Dawai Kudroen. Thank you so much for watching. And as said earlier, we will be bringing you a series of debates as issues are deliberated in the Parliament. Thank you so much.